You are listening to Build What's Next, Digital Product Perspectives. I'm your host, Josh Lucas, and at Method, our vision is to connect technology with humanity for a simpler digital future. Join us as we speak with leading experts to discuss industry trends, best practices, and emerging technology that can help you and your organization craft better digital products and experiences. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Build What's Next podcast here at Method. We are excited that you are able to join us. I'm excited for you to get to hear who we have on the show today. So one voice you have heard before, Jason Rome, who is our head of solutions here at Method, but one you have not. And today we're sitting down not just with Jason, but with Robert Neer. Robert is celebrating 15 years as an executive product leader in corporate America, and he's an executive in residence of the Product Management Leadership Accelerator at the Michael G. Foster School of Business at the University of Washington, and has had the opportunity to lead a number of product teams throughout various companies. And so we're very excited, Robert, that you're joining us here today. Jason, I'm going to let you set this one up a little bit here today because this is really your baby here. This is going back to previous episodes that we've had where we've been really talking about the idea of modern product. And if you haven't listened to the previous episodes that we've had, I'd highly encourage you to do so. There's a number of them out there. And Jason, you've assembled a lot of different talking points to try and connect the dots around this idea that a lot of companies really are enacting a number of these things, but you're trying to pull them all together underneath of this modern product umbrella. And so I know you were excited to bring Robert onto the show here today. So what are we digging into today? What's on your mind?
Yeah, one of the things we've been saying about modern product, and I'll say if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, I do have a tendency to repeat myself. So you might be okay. Yeah, you're probably going to be okay. And I think one of the things we say that's interesting about modern product is how do you take the skills from startups but execute in the enterprise? And I think that's one of the things that's toughest. And I think what's great about Robert's background is you worked at Amazon, which writes books about product. Working backwards. One-way doors, the PRFAQ, a lot of kind of famous techniques that have worked their way into the product lexicon. But you've also had to try to apply that in different enterprises that are in varying places on their product journeys. And funny enough, Robert and I were, we were going to do potentially a podcast on the impacts of Gen AI for product managers, which we'll save for another one. So teaser for a future episode there. But I think when we called to prep for this, we just started talking about what we've been up to lately. And by the end of the call, we had accidentally recorded a whole podcast on the phone and just forgotten to talk about it. But so the topic, and this is an interesting one right now, is we're seeing a lot of organizations, move away from the focus on agile transformation or digital transformation. And they're really focusing on, what does it mean to be a product-led organization? Which I think has a lot of implications on the people, on the skill sets, on the org structure, and on the strategy. And that's a conversation that Robert and I really wanted to have today, is kind of like, what are the implications of being a product-led organization? Why are we struggling to potentially be a product-led organization? And then, what are some tactical things and mindsets and toolkits that, if you're a product manager or really a product leader trying to get to this state, how do you increment your way there? So, Robert, you and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, but I thought you had a really interesting insight on like what are product managers really being asked to do now in 2024 that maybe they weren't asked to do the last 10 to 15 years. So kind of a state of product management in the enterprise, if you will. So we'll open up there and we'll go down the list here.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thank you all for inviting me here. I'm excited to have this conversation. It's good to see you again, Jason. So excited to participate in this. And, I think, in terms of the question of what do we hope to be asking product managers to do in general, I think, when you've gotten to the point where you have sort of really achieved a product-oriented model, fundamentally, what you should be asking product managers to be accountable for is, are you building a product that answers to a real customer problem? Are you solving a customer problem that matters to your customers in a way that they will love and in a way that you can make money at? So is it valuable? will the customers find value in it, and is it viable? And all of that really points to the outcome that you're trying to drive, which is some value for the business through really addressing customer needs. And I think that's what we increasingly hope to equip product managers to be able to do well, and ask them to be accountable for showing that they can do that well. I think what has happened in a lot of organizations is they've started down a path of a product centered organization, and um, have done a lot of sort of nominal things. Like they've changed some titles, and they've created a product organization, and they've asked people to behave in certain ways and do certain ceremonial things, often concurrently with an implementation of some agile delivery model. And they're really more like project managers or analysts or coordinators doing rote work or feature driven work. So there are feature teams versus really trying to discover what is the most valuable thing we can do for our customers in a way that makes us, sustainable operating income from a business viability standpoint. And I think need to be asking more of product teams.
Yeah, I like that a lot because, when you state it, it sounds easy, right? Oh, we're going to build something for a customer that matters. And I think the word matters is the hard part because there's no limit to the number of customers' problems that you will find when you go do discovery work or when you go talk to customers. Many of them are not worth solving. And a lot of product folks, and I've heard this from executives lately, struggle with that commercial mindset and what that means. And I think it's an interesting place to start of like why that is. And so you mentioned, these product managers are behaving like project managers and BAs. And it's interesting because as I go from organization to organization, there's product management has different heritages in different organizations. And that's kind of one of the things I've seen. I'll be curious your thoughts on like why product managers are struggling with this, but you do see the, converted analyst, I was more of a BA and now I've been given the product owner or the product manager title. The second one I see is kind of the X strategy SME of like, I know my domain really well. So you work with a healthcare company, it's an X pharmacist. You work with a bank, it's an X investment banker or an X frontline banker. And then the third group is you have these digital natives that grew up running the Silicon Valley playbook that, worked at a capital P product company where the product was the thing that made money. And now they're trying to apply it in the enterprise. So I think that's one of the things I've seen is like product has so many different heritages and origins. And in a lot of companies, it's not one, it's a mixing of all these three. And so you have folks with different strengths and weaknesses. And I'm not saying one's better than the others, but I think they all, can bring a lot to the table. But if you don't have them oriented correctly in a way that connects and drives value, it can be tough. So I'd be curious, you get to talk to a lot of folks and come across a lot of organizations. Like, why are we struggling with this? Like, what's hard about it?
There's a quote that happy families are all alike, but every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. I think that's true about sort of semi-functional product organizations. There's a lot of situational uniqueness to each organization, but there are definitely, I think, some themes that come through in a lot of different areas and different patterns. I think one is not necessarily getting clarity at an alignment that of the purpose of shifting to a product led or product oriented model. I think that is one place that often it emerges out of a technology team, out of an IT team, and it comes along with a shift to more agile delivery. And there's an idea that we need to introduce this product management function in order to sort of work the playbook of modern technology development without really getting clear at the whole organizational level, the whole enterprise level on why. Like, why is this actually going to drive value faster? And I think that one, I think you need to find a way to fresh that conversation within organizations and get to the very sort of top leadership layer and on the why of an operating model that's oriented around products. Often it is meaningfully a shift from a project-oriented model to a product-oriented model. That's sort of functionally a lot of what happens is somebody realizes that there's opportunity to approach some of these problems differently and not tee up an entire end-to-end project with a fully baked specification from day one, because that, counter to all the agile methodologies too, that leads to a lot of, misdirection and things that don't work. But getting to a point where you can really orient the entire organization on why product management is going to make a difference, and then actually executing it in a way that shows meaningful out of that shift. I think, a lot of people then become product managers, shifting over from other roles. And I also think that take doesn't always anchor itself in super customer-centered ways. And you recast project people into product roles, and then are upset that this product model isn't really giving us the value that we thought it was going to give us. And you really have never gone to the point of defining the outcomes from a value standpoint that you're trying to chase. I think that's a big part of it. I think empowerment and accountability takes courage from both leaders and teams. So the idea that you want to empower your teams to chase problem areas and then come up with their own roadmap of features based on their discovery and their closeness to the customer, and you want to empower that, but that comes with an accountability to actually deliver outcomes. And frankly, output is a lot easier than outcomes. Outcomes should be a little bit scary for people because it's a much more complex problem, especially when you're dealing with consumer behavior. You're going to be wrong a lot of the time, and you need to be able to continue to iterate, be empowered to iterate, but take the accountability of signing up for outcomes. And I think that is also a leap that a lot of places don't take, is actually having accountable delivery, not just to, the old project world, I shipped a thing on time, but did it actually drive the business forward? Did it make any difference to the customer behavior? And has it resulted in the outcome that we want?
The E word came up again, empowerment. I think we could put together a best of empowerment quotes probably after a couple of these, because it does come up a lot as I think it's the product buzzword right now.
I do like that though, empowerment and encouragement. Keep me honest, I think that's what you said. Empowerment and encouragement takes courage.
Yeah, I think it's empowerment and accountability. Because I think they should go hand in hand. Like, you should be empowered to, the act of empowerment takes a certain amount of humility on leadership's side to say, we hope and expect that our teams who are closer to the work and closer to the customers will make smarter decisions than I will, up here in terms of like a feature level thing to go do. And so that's the level of empowerment. But then you need to hold those teams accountable to delivering a result out of that. So I think those empowerment and accountability, and then it takes a certain amount of courage from both leaders and the teams who are given that empowerment with the accountability.
I think one of the hard things for orgs is like a lot of the companies that initially did product work didn't have to define what it meant to be a product org, because their product is what they use to make money. So if you're working at a software company and you're selling TurboTax, which if they'll sponsor Armando Baycott, maybe they'll sponsor me too. So here's a free plug, TurboTax. You look at how many people use the software, and that's how you make money. If you're at a bank and you own the customer portal or you own the new account open, you are trying to get someone to open a bank account. No one pays to use that software. And so you're just layers removed a lot of times. And as you go deeper into the stack, if you're a product manager on an API, developer portal, it can be, you have to kind of abstract yourself from how you drive value for the business, which can be hard, which actually I think, Robert, is going to be our next topic. But the last thing I'll say too is, I think if people are wondering like why they're struggling with this, I think the why is a really important one. But I think asking yourself, like, do we give people enough time to do it? Have we modeled the behaviors for how to do it? Do we have people that want to do it? Because, Robert, you said a lot of product teams are feature teams, which is still a really valuable construct. You do still need people to build stuff and get the build work done and build features. So that's still extremely important. Or are you not empowering people to do that? And I think sometimes too, when I ask people why they struggle to do this, they look to leadership and say like, well, I don't understand leadership's vision and leadership strategy. So there's it's not just on the product managers to step into this role. I think to your point, the accountability is that sharing of vision so people know what they're going for. But one thing that we've talked about a little bit too is this idea of value streams and how teams are organized. Because in order to drive value, teams need to be able to map how they're going to drive value and how they sit in the organization. So we've talked a little bit about team topologies and value streams and value chains and domain-driven design and all of that. I'd be curious what you're seeing of like, where are the breaks in actually like the structural issue for companies that's preventing them from doing modern product well?
Yeah. So I think, so building on the point you just made around, TurboTax, the technology is the product. That is true of, a lot of sort of Silicon Valley modeled product organizations. The product is the technology that is shipped. And therefore, sort of a lot of other organizations who hear about the product will say, well, we're not a technology company like that, so product doesn't really apply to us. And, my view is product-oriented thinking and development and problem solving is critical for any business that believes technology is core to how it will actually build value. Whether it is the product itself or it's technology-enabled business, like a core retailer or a pharmacy or something like that, it's also critically important to think about product in that context. But I do think that it changes a little bit of that equation and how you solve it in the best way, because then you get into this mapping between how the business is organized around managing the value it delivers, the P&Ls that it has, the various different sort of value groupings, and often from a technology standpoint, those don't map very well, especially if the product model is emerging out of an IT team. And IT is often very organized, very functionally by code base, by things like that, and not around a customer journey or a customer value stream. So then there's an attempt often to create those new topologies around value stream teams and an end-to-end value for a customer within the product organization. And you need the collaboration and the partnership with your business experts in order to be successful in that model. Otherwise, it just is another sort of layer of complexity and it doesn't simplify anything. But sometimes that's hard and sometimes they don't map right away. So you see that the product teams has an organizational structure and has defined value streams that are very different from how the business actually organizes themselves. And then you've just you've just pushed the complexity to a different part of the process and a different layer in the system, rather than trying to sort of create some coherence around defining the problem space that we're going to try to tackle. So I think that, sometimes that has to happen, in a sort of serialized way, like you start with one and then you move to the other. And there generally has to be something that kind of bridges the gap, some sort of, portfolio management team or something like that, that helps you sometimes equate it to like a strangler pattern when you're moving to a new platform. When you're moving to new models, not everything's going to be in place on day one, and you might need this abstraction layer in between to help you bridge the old world and the new world in a safe way, so you don't drop things and so you don't leave people out. Otherwise, internal to the organization, there becomes a sort of zero-sum thinking around this product model, which says, for this new product model to win, I, business owner, have to lose. I have to give something up. I have to give up my decision rights. I have to give up participating in, feature discussions. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be that the pie gets bigger when you apply sort of technology fluent product managers to hard business problems and believe that technology is a mechanism to solving those business problems in a unique way. And you can map those business topologies to the value stream topologies, but that takes a couple of steps and it's usually done in an incomplete way. And the longer it lingers, the harder that starts to be, and it starts to degrade.
Yeah, I like that, describing it almost as this handshake, because the pattern we're trying to break here is, business gives a requirement to the technology team gives an estimate with a bit of padding, because they know the business is going to be angry about it and there's going to be things we discover along the way. But it becomes this pattern where the business is a consumer of technology services, not a collaborator in making decisions together. And that's really what each business has to give up the perfect certainty that they're asking for of long-term dates. While, technology, I guess they're not giving something up, they're taking on accountability for what they build and if it works or not. And I think, something you hit on was key there is like a lot of people just try to solve this top down first, and rethinking how the actual development teams are organized is kind of a secondary thought. And I had this quote once from a client of mine. We were doing some journey and design work, and he said, I love journey maps, I love designs. He's like, but it's all paperwork until we get to code. And I think that's really key here, because I see a lot of organizations that they build these value stream teams, but then they're lost in terms of like, great, we have this great idea, we have this great solution that we need, and there's no clear mapping to like who's going to be able to build that and when they're going to be able to build it, and there's no correct allocation, I guess, of capacity against where the business is going to have needs long term. And so, yeah, you move to Agile, but then, you start moving Scrum teams every couple weeks to a new thing, to a new part of the code base. And you're just adding cognitive load, and you're asking your teams to like learn new parts of the code base and context switch all the time. And and there's no kind of consistency that gives team times to go through the norming, forming, storming phases where they're really getting into a flow. And there's so much loss in that context switching. And so I think I'd almost prefer to do it as much bottoms up as top down. Like really you have to do both at once to look at, okay, what are the technology platforms and products that we're going to have in our portfolio? And how much work and investment are we going to do in each aspect of our portfolio based on where there is business value to create? And having that connected view and that alignment, because now we can start to organize our teams based on where there is going to be work over time, instead of moving the teams to find the work when the business identifies new work. And it's not going to be perfect. You still do need some dynamic capacity. It's going to take time to get that model right and that model adjusted. But to your point, that's why you can do this incrementally as you learn the capacity and you model that, not do a whole reorg all at once and try to move to product-led overnight by dictating it with your org chart. So I really like that point that you made.
One small point is I've started to try to use product-led a lot less and find alternatives to product-led, because it's easy to have that misinterpreted as a power grab by whoever's decided to implement product management. And as suddenly everything is led by a product manager as a new function and a new entity. And in my mind, the shift should be that it's a product-centered model, or a product operating model, or whatever it might be, because I think this gets to the point of like the topologies and how we work together with the different interested stakeholders and parties. You want to create this sort of complementary partnership between the highly expert business people, the technology fluent product managers, the designers, the tech leads in this model where they work together to solve this hard, uncover the right problems to solve, discover that they're solving them in the right way, learn from their mistakes, course correct along the way. And it's not about, product manager taking control. It's about a product team being the orientation around how you deliver value.
I really like that, because I'll say even what we call modern product is often misinterpreted as you're going to train my product team. When in fact, a lot of what we do does focus on the Agile core, but honestly, a lot of the training is how product engineering and design can have a better, more collaborative relationship, but then also how the rest of the organization can make sense of the product organization. So one of the biggest gaps we see right now is, all right, I've got this customer experience team that does my NPS survey, they do customer research, they do our JD Power benchmarking. How do they work with the product team? And how do we take all these insights and get it to the product team at the right time, at the right moment? So we do this thing called an insights to impact mapping, which is, okay, what is the cadence at which we collect these insights? What's the level? Are we collecting them at an enterprise level, at a segment level, at a product level? And what's the right time to introduce those to the product team so that it can influence the roadmap? And so, because there's going to be stuff that we're going to find out from our customers that we're not going to change without a budget event. where, hey, this is big enough where it's going to have to be next year's budget. There's going to be stuff that we're going to find that is going to be, hey, is probably need to be two, three PIs out to be able to influence. But we're going to learn stuff that, hey, you guys are working on this feature for this upcoming sprint. We're hearing this. This is urgent. You need to hear this. And I find a lot of organizations, there's no rhythm of business between kind of that CX, that research, that marketing function, and the business and the product function in a way that's repeatable and it's scalable. It's kind of there's still a lot of like tribal knowledge that you just hope people run into each other. And I think especially in this remote working situation, like those natural connections happen even less than they used to. So, all this to say, I really like the point of if there's a better word than product led, I like product centered, but the word product does throw people off because it is both the thing and the person. Which makes this really tough. So we agree as an organization, we want to be product centered, right? And so now you're asking your product strategy team or your product management team and your engineering and your design team, hey, come up with a strategy. What's hard about that? Like what have you seen work? What have you seen not work? I'd love to hear some stories of what you guys did at Amazon and how long does a PR FAQ really take? How well did those techniques work? And have you seen it apply to enterprise or have you had to alter that strategy a little bit?
I mean, I think when it comes to product strategy, it's sort of approached differently depending on the maturity of the organization and the maturity of the product thinking. But I think, in a lot of places, I look to a sort of leadership layer of product to really drive a strategy, meaning they are identifying the really important, most meaningful problem areas. And some of this then translates into how they organize their product team. They organize around those enduring problem spaces and say these, solving these really important problems for our customers, our stakeholders, whoever they might be, is core to our overall enterprise strategy. And so the first, hard part about strategy like that is that it does demand some tough choices made at leadership levels around what's really important, and not to have a list of 50 most important things to go do, to try to narrow down to these are core critical problem areas, and this is how I want to organize my product team around solving those. And this is the outcomes that we hope to see as they're getting better at solving those problems. I think that it sort of has to start with a leadership level hard choices around focus and what are the most important problem areas to solve. And then returning a certain amount of authority to the teams to take that information, and then they are now closer to the customer, closer to the problem, and start to develop their experiments around what is the right way to solve those problems. And that turns into their roadmap, and hopefully they're getting able to validate some of those assumptions pretty quickly so that they know they're on the right track and they iterate on that. And a lot of that is then how you generate those insights and customer information. And sometimes it's a centralized function, like a customer research team, which I think is meaningful if they're really good at helping you structure an effort to go answer a particular set of questions. I do think depending on where you are in your discovery phase, there is a really valuable kind of unstructured wandering with customers that can be meaningful. And so I think part of the challenge for a lot of organizations is how do you get the key product managers close to customers and to interact with customers and to listen in a way that isn't about being told what to build by customers, but is about understanding where are they struggling, what would be meaningful to them, what would excite them about a new type of solution, and to sort of do a little bit of unstructured wandering. And so you can gather insights from those types of engagements and then structure your follow-on with a research team to kind of get more information. And then taking those insights and turning them into some set of action, which basically comes with sort of understanding, this is where the sort of business fluency really comes in too. You have to understand the inputs to the business that you have an opportunity to impact with these different solutions, and creating basically a hypothesis that says, if I do X, I expect to see this type of change, and then being able to test that as quickly as you can, to get into some, insight around, are you on the right path? And then, your leadership layer also has to help sort of knock barriers out of the way to all of that activity. And so I think that's why it's hard, because it requires a deliberate choice of getting product managers close to customers, collecting those insights, and then making sure that they are fluent enough around how to interpret those insights, how to collect that data, how to use it to form a hypothesis around what will change if they make a certain change in the product, and then figure out how to test their way into knowing if that's the right thing to do.
Thank you for joining us on Build What's Next, Digital Product Perspectives. If you would like to know more about how Method can partner with you and your organization, you can find more information at method.com. Also, don't forget to follow us on social and be sure to check out our monthly Tech Talks. You can find those on our website. And finally, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on any future episodes. We'll see you next time.